You know that feeling, right? That sudden, like, hot surge of frustration. Maybe the kids
Yeah.
are loud, everything's chaotic, and you just snap. Or maybe you shut down completely.
Hmm.
And then, almost immediately, that awful feeling hits, the self-anger, that voice saying, ugh, why did I do that again? What's wrong with me?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm such a terrible parent. That kind of internal monologue, it's incredibly common.
it really is. And if that sounds familiar to you, even just sometimes, you are definitely not alone.
It's a really powerful and frankly painful feeling. And parenting, well, it has this unique mix, doesn't it? Intense love, but also relentless pressure. It seems to just bring this stuff right to the surface for so many of us.
It absolutely does. And that specific kind of anger, the one turned inward, often sparked by, how we react to our kids.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're
Yeah.
using insights from this really useful guide. It's called Deep Dive Parenting Guide, Healing Self-Anger.
And our goal here in this deep dive is basically to take that material and really boil it down to. We want to pull out the most important bits,
Right.
help you understand where this self-anger actually comes from, and then, crucially, give you some practical, actionable things you can do, ways to navigate it and find, hopefully, a more peaceful place, a more grounded place.
So if you feel kind of stuck in that loop, reaction, then regret, reaction, then regret, let this be a reassurance. You're not broken.
Definitely not.
The guide makes it really clear this isn't just about, like, a momentary lapse. It often runs much, much deeper than the present moment.
But, and this is the really hopeful part woven through it all,
Yeah.
recognizing these patterns, that actually gives you the power to choose something different. You can shift things.
Okay, so let's start unpacking that foundation. One of the first big ideas in the guide is that this self-anger, it isn't just you failing. It's not a sign you're a bad parent.
No, it's often rooted in something the guide calls an emotional legacy.
An emotional legacy. Okay, so that sounds like it's something passed down. Is that, like, genetic?
Not exactly DNA, no. It's more about learned patterns and how your nervous system was basically trained growing up to respond to stress.
Ah, okay.
So if the adults around you when you were little were, say, very reactive emotionally, or maybe they shut down feelings or were aggressive with their anger, your brain, as it was developing, it kind of observed that, and it encoded those reactions as, like, the normal way to handle difficult stuff.
So your system just defaults to what it saw as the standard operating procedure back then.
Pretty much, yeah. The material touches on this concept, the intergenerational transmission of trauma. It's work that people like Yehuda and Lerner have explored. Basically, unresolved trauma or just really difficult emotional dynamics in one generation that can really impact the next generation's emotional health, how they regulate.
And that connects directly to our own childhoods, right? The guide mentions things like neglect or abuse or even just like general instability. It even references the ACE study.
The Adverse Childhood Experiences
Yeah.
Study, yeah, that's a big one.
So what's the link there between those experiences and this self-anger now?
Well, those early adverse experiences, even things that might not seem like big T trauma, they can create what the source describes as a hyperreactive stress response. Your brain and nervous system basically become extra sensitive, always scanning for danger.
Okay, so things that are actually just normal parenting, stress, the noise, the demands, the kids having meltdowns, your system might be interpreting those as actual threats.
Exactly. It triggers that fight or flight response. And that intense energy, if you can't literally run away or fight something off, it often turns into anger. Sometimes it explodes outwards, sometimes it implodes inwards as that harsh self-criticism and shame. It's not really a conscious choice in the moment. It's more like a biological program running based on old data.
Wow, okay. That really reframes it, doesn't it? It's less about, I'm a bad parent right now, and more, my old survival system just got triggered by this current stresses.
Yes. And then, layered on top of that already reactive system, there's another big piece the guide discusses. The inner critic and shame.
Right, that voice.
That relentless negative self-talk that
Yeah.
just floods in after you've reacted in a way you regret. Why did I do that? I'm such a failure. My kids deserve better.
Yeah.
You know, the one.
Oh, yeah, the one that kicks you when you're already down.
Exactly that. And that constant internal attack, it fuels this deep, corrosive shame. And the guide points out something really important here,
What's that?
that this shame, this intense internal pressure, it often ends up manifesting externally, especially when you're exhausted, overwhelmed, typical parenting state, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to just sit with intense shame. So sometimes that internal pain kind of flares out as irritability or those explosive reactions we feel so bad about later.
So the self-anger and the shame, they kind of bubble over onto the situation or the people around you. That makes a painful kind of sense.
It's a real cycle, isn't it? You've got these old patterns, maybe a nervous system wired for threat. Then the inner critic jumps in, fueling shame. And all that pressure just has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
You
But,
know,
okay, the really hopeful part of this guide, the reason we're diving into it, is what comes next, right? This idea that it's not fixed. Our brains can actually change.
absolutely. This is where the science gets really encouraging. The material really emphasizes brain plasticity. Your brain isn't set in stone by your past experiences.
It keeps changing.
It keeps changing throughout your life based on what you focus on, what you practice, your experiences.
This connects to that neuroscience idea, doesn't it? The whole neurons that fire together, wire together
Right.
thing.
Exactly that. It's a fundamental concept. The more often you think a certain thought or do a certain behavior, the stronger the connections, the neural pathways for that thought or behavior become.
So if my go-to thought is, I'm angry and I messed up again, I'm actually strengthening the brain circuits for anger and self-blame.
You are, yes. But, and this is the powerful flip side, the reverse is also true. If you intentionally, consciously practice different responses.
Like pausing or thinking something else.
Yes. Pausing, choosing a different thought, practicing feeling calm, you actually start building new neural pathways. You're literally creating alternative routes for your brain signals to travel down.
You're actively rewiring your own reactions through effort.
That's it. And the really profound takeaway from this part of the guide is you are not your anger. You are the awareness behind the anger, the one who notices it. Your thoughts and actions aren't just fleeting things. They are actively sculpting your brain's structure. They shape how you experience and respond to everything.
Okay, that is genuinely empowering. So how do we actually do that? How do we use this brain plasticity to shift away from that default self-anger pattern? The guide gets really practical here.
It really does. It lays out some very clear, actionable steps. They're science-based, but also, heart-centered. And the very first one is foundational. Identify your triggers with curiosity, not judgment.
Curiosity, not judgment. That feels like the key shift right there. Because the default is always judgment, isn't it? Why am I like this?
Right. So instead of beating yourself up, the practice is just to observe. Like a scientist studying a phenomenon. When that feeling starts, the frustration, the self-anger, just pause for a second.
Be
Curious.
Ask questions.
Yeah. Ask yourself, what just happened? What thought immediately popped into my head? And does this feeling, this situation, feel familiar? Is this belief I'm having about myself right now maybe connected to something older, something from my past?
And the guide suggests a really concrete tool for this, keeping a trigger journal for a week. What sort of things would you actually jot down?
The specifics are helpful.
Okay.
Like, what time was it? What was the situation? What was the exact thought that came up? What did you feel physically like? Heat in your chest, tight jaw, buzzing energy? And then what did you actually do or say?
So you're basically collecting data on your own internal patterns.
Exactly. Because as the material really stresses, you can't change what you're not aware of. Awareness has to be step one. It's a prerequisite for any kind of rewiring.
Got it. Observe the pattern first with curiosity. Then step 2 is about actively intervening. Reframe the thought.
Right. This is where you consciously step in and choose a different internal narrative. You're deliberately trying to create those new neurons firing together moments to build those alternative brain pathways we talked about.
The guide gives some really good examples of this reframing. Like, instead of that old harsh thought, what's the replacement?
Well, I'd say the old thought is something like, I always mess this up. The practice is to shift it consciously to something like, okay, I made a mistake here and I'm learning from it. See the difference.
Yeah, it's moving from a fixed negative identity, I am a mess up, to acknowledging an action and a process, I did something and I can learn.
Exactly. Or in that moment when you feel the anger surging, instead of letting the thought, I'm just so angry, take over.
You reframe it to something more observational.
Yeah, something like, okay, I notice I'm feeling heat in my chest right now. I am safe in this moment. I can choose to take a breath. It acknowledges the physical feeling without identifying with the anger itself. It grounds you in present safety and reminds you, crucially, that you have a choice.
That leads perfectly into the next step, doesn't it? Step 3, meditate daily, even just for 5 minutes. And the guide emphasizes this isn't just about feeling nice, it actually changes your brain.
It really does. It's backed by solid research. The source mentions studies, like from Lazar's group or Holzel's group, showing that regular meditation can literally alter your brain structure. For instance, it can lead to a shrinking of the amygdala.
The amygdala, that's like the brain's smoke detector, right? The alarm system.
That's a great way to put it. So medication helps kind of recalibrate that super sensitive alarm we talked about earlier. A less reactive amygdala means fewer false alarms, fewer times your fight or flight gets triggered by everyday parenting stuff.
Okay, so it helps turn down the volume on the automatic panic button?
Right. And it also does other things,
Yeah.
like strengthening the prefrontal cortex. That's the part involved in rational thought, planning, and importantly, emotional control.
The CEO part of the brown.
Sort of, yeah.
Hmm.
And it can increase gray matter density in areas linked to empathy and self-awareness. So you're quite literally building a brain that's better equipped to be calm, controlled, and compassionate.
That's incredible that just a few minutes a day can make that kind of physical difference. And the guide keeps the how-to really simple, really?
Super simple. The main thing is just start small.
Yeah.
Find a quiet spot, even just for 2, 3, 5 minutes. Focus on your breath. There's a simple pattern they suggest. Inhale for 4 counts, hold gently for 4, exhale slowly for 6. That exhale is key for calming the nervous system.
Okay.
And you could use those affirmations we talked about as reframes. Silently repeat things like, I am calm, I am safe, I am choosing peace.
So consistency is more important than duration, especially when starting out. And they mention apps too, right? Like Insight Timer, Headspace, Calm.
Absolutely. Those can be really helpful guides, especially if you're new to it. The key is just starting. Even 2 minutes done consistently makes a difference over time.
Okay, step 4 brings this right into the heat of the moment. Practice mindful parenting in the moment.
Yes, this is about applying the awareness and the intention you're building through the other steps right when you need it most.
Mhm.
The absolute core practice here is creating a little bit of space, that pause between the trigger, maybe your child does something challenging, and your reaction. Just
Yeah.
pause.
That pause, it can feel like the hardest thing in the world when you're seeing red.
Oh, it really can. But the guide offers some practical techniques. One is actually speaking your intention out loud.
How does that work?
You could say, maybe quietly to yourself, or even to your child, depending on their age and the situation, something like, okay, mommy's taking a deep breath right now because I want to respond calmly, not just yell.
Oh, I like that. You're narrating the process you want to follow. You're making it conscious.
Exactly. And you're modeling self-regulation in real time, which is huge for kids.
Mhm.
You can also narrate needing space, like, wow, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I need to step away for just a minute to calm down. I'll be right back.
That shows them it's okay to feel big feelings, and here's a healthy way to handle them instead of exploding or shutting down.
Precisely. Powerful modeling.
Okay, step 5 gets physical. Use somatic tools to release stored anger. This acknowledges that anger isn't just a thought, it's an energy in your body, right?
Yes, exactly. It's a physiological response.
Yeah.
You often need physical ways to help your body process and release that built-up stress energy. The source suggests several really simple somatic tools.
Like what kind of things?
One is shaking, literally just shaking your hands, your arms, your legs. You see animals do this after a stressful event. It helps discharge adrenaline.
Okay.
Another is a cold water splash. Just splashing cold water on your face or running wrists under cold water. It can quickly activate the vagus nerve, which helps calm your whole system down. It's surprisingly effective. And simple movement. Get up, walk quickly around the room, do 10 jumping jacks, walk outside for 2 minutes, anything to physically move that energy out of your body.
Those sound incredibly practical. Things you could actually do in a tough moment to just short-circuit that overwhelming physical feeling of anger.
They are. They're tools to work with your body's response, helping it complete the stress cycle safely.
Right. Okay, step 6 feels deeper, more about healing the roots. Write a letter to your younger self.
Yes. The guide presents this as a really powerful exercise for getting at some of those older wounds we talked about, the ones that might fuel the current reactivity. It's about connecting with the child version of you.
The one who first learned these patterns, maybe.
Exactly, the one who experienced whatever difficulties led to these coping mechanisms.
So what do you actually do in the letter? What do you write?
You acknowledge what that younger you went through. You validate their feelings, especially the hard ones. You speak to them with the compassion and understanding they might have needed back then, but maybe didn't get.
You give them the words you needed to hear.
Yes. You offer comfort, reassurance, validation. You essentially become the compassionate witness and ally for your younger self.
What's the effect of doing that now?
It can be profound. It helps soothe those wounded parts that the inner critic tends to attack.
Yeah.
You're actively building a different internal voice, a kind, nurturing inner parent voice. And that directly counteracts the harshness of the critic and helps heal the shame at its root.
Wow. That sounds like it could really shift the whole internal landscape.
It addresses the internalized pain that often fuels the self-anger cycle. It's deep work.
Okay, and the final step, number 7, brings it all together. Commit to consistent practice. This isn't magic. It's about sticking with it.
Absolutely critical. The material is very clear. Changing deeply ingrained neural pathways and emotional habits takes repetition. It's about consistency, not perfection. You will slip up. That's part of the process.
And that's okay. The goal isn't necessarily to never feel angry again, right? It's more about changing your relationship with the anger.
Exactly. It's about learning to respond thoughtfully from that place of awareness and choice we've been talking about, rather than just automatically reacting based on old programming. Every single time you manage to pause or reframe a thought or take a few calming breaths or use a somatic tool,
You're strengthening those new
you're
pathways.
strengthening new pathways. You're reinforcing that powerful truth. You are building a new brain. One more peaceful thought, one mindful pause, one moment of self-compassion at a time.
It's a journey, like you said, not a destination, but every step counts.
Every single step.
Okay, wow. This deep dive drawing on this guide has really laid out such a clear, hopeful path. We've talked about how parental self-anger often has these deep roots, generational patterns, childhood stuff,
Yeah.
but also how our brains can change. They're adaptable. And then we walk through these really concrete, practical steps anyone can start taking.
Yeah. And the guide's closing message is so important, I think. Feeling self-anger doesn't make you a bad parent. It just makes you human. A human navigating your history while doing a really demanding job.
Right.
The real power comes from knowing you can interrupt those old cycles. You don't have to pass them on.
You really have the chance to model something different for your kids. Not perfection, goodness knows, but
Okay.
genuine self-awareness, compassion when you mess up, and the willingness to change and grow. And the guide really shows that starts with how you learn to treat yourself.
Absolutely. And maybe just to leave you with something to think about, consider the ripple effect. The guy talks about how these patterns get passed down. So if you actively work on your own healing, using these kinds of tools while you're parenting, how might your choice, your work to build a different internal world for yourself, how might that actually change the whole family story? Not just for your kids right now, but maybe for generations that follow them. How does healing your own past help create a fundamentally different future?